I'm joined with Peter Dowd, who's the Labour MP for Liverpool Bootle. Thanks for having me. Also, congratulations with your majority of 29,000. That's pretty
almost
impressive.
Yes.
We are quite pleased with that.
Well, I was pleased because it sort of just gave an endorsement for Labour, and I think the vote was up, and it's an endorsement for all the people who worked with me as well. So,
how important do you think it is that young people take an interest in politics?
well, I think it's absolutely important, and I, like you, became involved in politics when I was quite young, and my family have been involved in politics for years, and it's really crucial because at the end of the day, you now, the future, as I was at the time, you know, you have your future ahead of you and you want to become involved, and so it's really important that young people participate in politics in whatever way that might be, and whichever party that might be.
Why do you think young people should join the Labour Party then?
Well, I think there are a whole range of reasons why they should join the Labour Party, but I think the key for me is the whole question about sort of social justice and fairness, and putting those two concepts into place and into effect. And I think the Labour Party are the party who can do that. I think they don't have any axes to grind in terms of being in the pockets of big business, for example. Yeah. I think we do it for the most appropriate reasons, and purely for the benefit of the country, and for no one group or any particular individual at all.
Yeah, well, you were saying when you were younger you got involved. What got you involved in politics and interested?
Well, my family interested me enough for being involved in local politics for many years, and actually a couple of my, they were second cousins, were members of parliament, and we were involved locally in politics, in local government, going back decades. So there's a family background involved in that, and I think that stuff I talked before about the whole thing of social justice was imbued in me when I was young, and one of the ways you put that into effect there's different ways to put it into effect, but one of them is to become involved in politics. So that's why I became involved in politics, and it's not one of those things that it's like you think it through completely. It's one of those things that evolves.
It's quite gradual.
It is, yes, it's gradual. So you don't suddenly wake up one day and say, I want to be a politician. It develops as time goes by.
Why are you backing Andy Burnham for Labour leadership?
Well, I back Andy Burnham because I think some of the policies that he has are similar to the ones that I would have. Yeah. I think there's that. I think his background's important. I think he sends a message that you can be from an ordinary family and become involved in politics and go on to do important good things in politics. So there are a couple of reasons why, such as the bigger issues, and because of the sort of, if you want, the personality as well. And I also think the key is that I think he can be attractive, if you want, appealing to the country, whether that's young or old, whether it's north, south, whether it's men and women. I think young, old. So I think he's an appealing character, and that's what Labour also needs.
Do you think he'll be able to win back voters who voted UKIP and Green?
Well, I'm sure you can, because it's very difficult at this stage to decide why people did want to vote Green or to vote UKIP, and it's trying to tease out now aloud why that's the case. But I think we can, because the argument is if people who voted Green or who voted UKIP voted Labour in the past, they obviously don't have a big philosophical principled objection to voting Labour. I think they may just have felt that Labour at that particular point wasn't the party for them. So yes, I think we can bring many of them back.
Well, we were talking about UKIP. What was it like to stand against Paul Nuttall, who's the UKIP deputy leader?
Well, I didn't see him during the election campaign. He wasn't about. So it's very difficult to answer that one, because the only time I came into contact with him during the election campaign was actually on the night of the vote. So I hadn't seen him at all. So very difficult to say, because there wasn't really much activity from UKIP.
I was looking at the Welfare Reform Act, and I was looking at all the Labour MPs who voted against it rather than abstained, and I saw your name on the list. Why did you decide to vote against it?
Well, I decided to vote against it because I didn't agree that the policies that the government were trying to push through in that act were fair or reasonable or just. And the amendment that was moved was that we decline to give it a second reading, which is part of the legislative process they have to go through. We declined to give it unless they addressed the whole issue of things like child poverty and unfairness in the allocation of resources, and the government declined to do that. And I decided, having said that we shouldn't support it unless they did those things, given that they didn't, it seemed to me to be the sensible and logical and reasonable thing to do, to vote against it. That's why.
What do you think Labour have to do to win the next general election?
Well, I think they've got to appeal to a lot more people that they appealed to this time around, because there was this strategy, wasn't it, about the 35%. If you get 35% of the electorate, you can win the election. I think that's most probably not a tactic or a strategy, rather, that we should be going for next time. What we've got to do is to appeal to a whole load of people. So, for example, in Bootle constituency, you referred to the majority, 29,000. Well, we appeal to a whole load of people. We appeal to working people, we appeal to people who are on benefits, we appeal to people in the professional areas, we appeal to young people, old people. We appealed right across the spectrum, so to speak, and that's what Labour's got to do in the country. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a natural support in the likes of Bootle for Labour. There is, and there's no good getting away from that. But the idea that all those people just voted for Labour because they'd either always voted for Labour, or their dads had voted for Labour, or their mums or their granddads, is ridiculous. We appealed as part of a whole process building up to the election, and we've got to do that in the country.
What would you like to achieve as MP for Bootle?
Well, I think for me, I think it's partly to make sure that I have a presence in the constituency. We're sitting, for example, in the office that we have that I've set up. We're in the middle of setting it up, so everything isn't operating now, but it's right in the centre of the town. It's right next to the bus station, the train station, right next to the shopping centre, so it's going to be very accessible. So I think I want to get the profile of the Member of Parliament for Bootle, in this case me, up. I want to sort of visit and engage with as many groups and organisations and people as I possibly can. And I think I have a good group of staff around me who can help me to do that, plus the local Labour Party to help me support that. So I want to get a presence, a visibility here in Bootle, but I also want to make sure that that voice is taken down there to Westminster. So we have Bootle's voice in Westminster, not Westminster's voice in Bootle.
Do you think it's important to be a localist, because there are a lot of MPs who are up and down in Parliament every couple of days?
Well, the reality is with Parliament is that Parliament sits usually from Monday to Thursday, and really that's where you have to be, because that's part of your job down there, voting against things like for or against acts of bills that are going to eventually become acts of Parliament, like the welfare reform and work bill that we were talking about before. So you have to be down there to express your view and to express the views of your constituents. So being down there Monday to Thursday, you really don't have an option. That's where it happens in terms of the legislative programme. And plus all the other stuff that goes on down there, because you meet up with all sorts of different organisations, whether it be organisations who are supporting the fight against cancer or muscular dystrophy, a whole range of organisations or people who are supporting the support for the Human Rights Act. So a lot of that activity goes on down there, and lots of activity goes on up here. So it's neither one. It isn't an and or, it's both.
Yeah. Do you have any funny stories from your time in politics so far?
Yes, I have lots of stories, and you put me on the spot there in terms of trying to remember one off the top of my head, and I think there are so many. I can't think of one that springs to mind. There's that many of them, really. But there are lots of there are lots of stories which are quite funny.
And you're from Liverpool, the capital of football.
Yes.
Are you a red or a blue?
I'm a blue.
Good.
Very sensible.
Very good. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Thanks.